Hi, welcome to the Story Hour podcast, Voices Unscripted, Stories Rewritten with your host, Sara Jaswal. Welcome back for another episode, everyone. Just want to start off by saying thank you to everyone who is tuning in, who is listening, downloading, and engaging with the content. I really appreciate that. And so just another little bit of a reminder is if you can subscribe to the Story Hour podcast, it helps to bring podcasts to more people. And that's the whole point of this. I want these conversations to be easily accessible for everyone so we can have these conversations together. And so if you could hit the like button, the subscribe button, download any episodes, that would really be so appreciative. And I'd be so grateful if you can do that. And so just wanted to start off by that and really just thanking my community. This is obviously a big part of it. I talk about it all the time, community connections, collective healing. And I just love this. This is very therapeutic for me. I really enjoy having these conversations and bringing these topics to the forefront and really using both combined my personal and my professional experience to shed light on what it means to be human and everything that we all go through because there's so much. Anyways, just want to say thank you again. And if you can continue to like, share, save, subscribe, send this to someone who might benefit from it, whatever it is. And now that summer is officially, well, sort of officially over, I'm ready for fall. I'm ready for the transition. I'm just really excited to be here. So grab a drink, grab a coffee, grab a water, whatever it is that fills your cup. I got mine right here. Cheers. I'm gonna take a sip right now. Oh, coffee is my go-to right now. So yeah, let's have a chat. Today, I wanted to have a conversation around grief. That is the topic of today's episode. I'm doing a presentation in a few weeks for an organization around grief, what it is, what does it entail, how does it impact us individually, collectively. This is specifically to non-death losses, the presentation that I'm doing, but they very much overlap. And so I just thought it'd be a good time for me to come on here and talk about grief and what that is and bring this conversation to the forefront because I think it's so important. And as you know, or I've talked about it, and if you don't know, we live in a very grief illiterate world. And when you hear people say that, that means that we're not educated on grief and what it means to be grieving and how it impacts every corner of our life, literally every corner of our life. There's different types of losses. And so I want to use this episode as an education piece, the work that I want to bring forward. And so obviously both personally and professionally, and I am a certified grief educator along with a registered counselor and a certified life coach. And so I want to bring the education piece here and just really talk about what it is, what it's like to grieve. I will probably bring in a lot of my own personal experiences because I think that's very relatable. That's something I do want to share and give you context into non-death losses because those are very often overlooked and people don't even realize they're grieving. And so I have been sharing for a while now, especially in the last year since I got my recent certification in becoming a grief educator. And I had a lot of people come to me and realize that I didn't know that that was also grief. So very important. And so let's get started. So first, I want to talk about grief and in the sense of when we think of grief, and most people, myself included, we think of someone who's dying or who's dead, right? Someone who's died. And that's what we think of grief. I know I did, and I know many people didn't realize there's a whole other component. So we have death loss, which is the death of a loved one or someone. And then we also have a whole other component of non-death losses. So non-death losses are losses that aren't when someone physically dies or passes away. And there's a whole category. I have some notes here that I'm going to refer to just to keep things moving that I will reference to. The reason why I want to bring this forward is because I myself didn't know that I was grieving. And so if you've been listening to my podcast, you know my story. I have a chronic eye condition. I've lost a lot of my vision. I didn't realize I was grieving. I walk into the doors of CNIB and they started talking to me about grief and they started talking to me about the different stages. And I didn't realize that because in my brain, I just thought, okay, I haven't lost anyone. And so I was really educated on, well, you are grieving because you've lost your sight, you've lost one of your senses. And so that's where it just was like a light bulb moment for me. And I don't think many people understand that they too are grieving, and it just doesn't look in the loss of a death loss. So let's talk about non-death losses. I'm going to run through what some examples of non-death losses are, just to give you an idea of what that can look like. Life transitions. We go through so much in life. We're transitioning from one stage to another, and there's a lot of grief in that, and people don't realize that. And even though it's the evolution of life and that's what we're supposed to do, but there still is loss in, what life once was to what life is now. So I'm just going to run through these. I'm not going to go into detail with all of them, but it'll paint you a good picture of what I'm referring to. So non-death losses, life transitions, infertility, trying to conceive, chronic health issues, illness or injury, divorce or separation, end of a relationship or even a friendship, estranged family members, a job loss, empty nesters, marriage, divorce, trauma, loss of a limb, loss of just identity, purpose, moving away from home, addiction. Those are some examples of non-death losses. So when you hear those, you might be thinking, well, how are those connected, or how does that make sense? There's all so much loss in each of those. And I'm not going to go into each detail of each one, but I hope that gives you an idea of what I mean when I say there's non-death losses and then death losses. The next thing I want to bring to the forefront is that there are different types of losses. And there are so many different models of grief and, all of that. I'm just bringing forward what I think is relevant or prevalent right now, and what I think is great to just start off by educating everyone on. Again, we'll have more conversations about this, but there are many different types of grief. And so when we talk about different losses and non-death losses versus death losses, I'm going to break that down for you just to give you a little bit more context of what that looks like and what that could be like. As I'm talking and as I'm sharing and you're listening to me, maybe just pause and think about which one applies to you in your life and how that's impacted you. Maybe there's one in there that you didn't even realize, and you're like, oh, wow, that actually is very prevalent in my own life right now. And so just getting the wheels turning and just bringing awareness to where you're at. And again, with no shame, no judgment, no blame on yourself. It just is, right? This is just a human experience. And so we all go through it. We all fall under different categories. And this isn't to label. I just want to really put out that disclaimer and preface that. Like, this isn't to label anyone. This isn't to do anything. This is just for awareness. This is just for education purposes only. This isn't therapy. Don't take this as a direct replacement to therapy. It's not that at all. This is just me educating and speaking and bringing awareness to it. If you are struggling in any of these areas and you're going through a lot and mental health is not great, I really advise you to go seek out professional support, because again, this is not replacement for therapy or coaching or any of that. This is just bringing awareness and having conversations about this topic. And so if you are in a crisis or there is something going on, please reach out to call the crisis line wherever you're located. Just seek professional support if this stirs up anything within you while I'm talking about it. So the different types of grief, we talk about anticipatory loss. So this is loss that happens before the loss. So example of this would be when we know someone's dying, but they haven't died yet. There's that anticipation of like, okay, it's going to happen any minute now. They're going to die. And so you're grieving before the actual grief even begins. And so that's very important and very common to feel that. And again, there isn't a right or a wrong, or, oh, the pre-loss is harder or easier than the post-loss. That's not what I'm trying to say here. There's so many nuances around this. I'm just trying to explain and bring awareness to how grief can show up in our life, in our heart, in our surroundings, and for other people as well. So maybe this doesn't apply to you, but maybe you have a family member or a friend or a colleague or just anyone in society that's grieving. I really hope this paints a picture that people are struggling in all different ways. Also in the situation of anticipatory grief, so I'll use myself as an example, having a chronic health condition that's progressive. So for me, my eye condition is progressive. I'm losing sight over time. And so for me, I have this anticipation every time I go to the doctor or every time something is changing with my sight or I can't see clearly, I'm sitting in anticipatory grief. It's like almost like I'm waiting for that shoe to drop in a way. But also, for example, for me, would be the change in seasons. So I've mentioned this before that the change of seasons really impacts my vision, going from like broad daylight to the nighttime. And so I constantly struggle with this almost every day because my night vision's so poor. So like during the day and when I know it's about to get dark, I'm sitting in anticipation, like, okay, it's going to get dark and everything is going to change. So that's an example there. Delayed grief. So this is grief that isn't felt in the moment, but it's felt much later. And there's so many reasons why someone would have delayed grief. And I think one of the most common ones is because we push it down. We don't give it the space and time it needs in the moment. And then it just festers and it builds up and it gets stored in our body. So then months later, maybe even years later, something will happen and it'll just trigger that memory or that moment. And then you're left to deal with it at that time. So that's what delayed grief is. And that, again, is very common in our society because most people don't process it. They just go about their life and they don't express their feelings, they don't express their emotions, and they don't be with it, and so on. Disenfranchised grief. So this is grief that is judged or minimized. Again, these are very common. And this happens, not only do we judge others and we minimize others' grief, but we also do it to ourselves, right? It's like a way of gaslighting ourselves, thinking that we should be further along or we should be over it by now. And we do the same to other people. Like, oh, it's been 5 years. Like, why hasn't that person gotten over it? You don't get over grief. I always say once you have a profound loss or, in your life, and unless you're getting that back, you're going to grieve that for the rest of your life. Your mom could pass away tomorrow and it could be 50 years later. You're still going to grieve her. You're still going to grieve the loss of not having a mother in your life. That doesn't change. Yeah, things change and you rebuild your life in other ways, but the grief is still there. So that's one example, obviously. If you have a chronic health condition, the grief never goes away. You rebuild yourself and you find a place of like acceptance, and maybe you don't find a place of acceptance. I still have a hard time accepting that like I can't see at nighttime and that I'm afraid of the dark and it's a safety issue for me. I don't think I'll ever be 100% fully accepted to that, but like it's just part of my routine. And of course I'm going to be down and out about it and upset about that. But this is such a big one. So I want to really bring this forward is because we don't know what someone's going through. There's no timeline on grief, which we will talk about, but that's what disenfranchised grief is. Ambiguous grief is grief that's hard to see. So again, people carry a lot of weight, carry a lot of grief that no one would ever even know about. And examples of this would be, for example, like a miscarriage, an abortion, divorce, or like an invisible illness. So like myself, you wouldn't know if you didn't know me or know my story that I have a chronic eye condition and that I can't see from the outside. But internally, I know it and I have the limitations. So that's what ambiguous grief means. And so you can imagine how many people are out in the world and you don't even know what's happening internally. Just being very like compassionate and empathetic to that everyone does carry a story and everyone has something going on that you may not even know about. Collective grief. So this is a grief we feel across the globe. Obviously, collectively, it's impacted society as a whole. Examples would be floods, fires, wars, pandemics. That's something that we all witness and experience together. Obviously, everyone's experience is going to be different, but we're all grieving collectively in our own way because it's impacting the whole world across the globe. Traumatic grief is when trauma plus grief basically intersect. And so that is traumatic loss, traumatic grief. And so it's important to note here that all grief does not have trauma, but all trauma has grief. And what I mean by that is someone could die very peacefully. It could be a very non-traumatic death. It was their time, and it was very peaceful. There was no trauma attached to that. That's what we mean by not all grief has trauma. But when someone has a traumatic experience, there is a lot of grief underneath that. And we will talk about that because I'm going to talk about secondary losses and what that looks like. And so trauma changes you, it rewires your whole brain, your whole body, your physiology. Like if everything changes psychologically, you change. And so obviously there's loss in that. You're not the same person you were pre-trauma versus who you are post-trauma. So that's why all trauma has grief. So the next one here is masked grief. So this is grief that is disguised in another way, usually like another emotion or feeling, but underneath that, the root cause of that is grief. And so a really good example of this is anger. And so many people have anger. We all do. Like, I don't think there's a person out there that hasn't felt anger, but anger is just, there's so much stigma around it. But if you actually unpack the anger and you start to do some really deep work with that individual, you will unpack that there's actually a lot of grief there. There's lots of pain. There's a lot of heartache there. There's a lot of loss there, whatever that may be. There can be a million examples of that. But just to give you an example of what masked grief looks like. And it's actually a really, I love this quote. It's by C.S. Lewis, and it's, "I sat with my anger long enough until she told me her real name was grief." I'll say that again. I sat with my anger long enough until she told me her real name was grief. Like, how profound is that quote and is that statement? It is so true. And, you know, if you're experiencing that and anger, or if you're like, wow, that actually makes a lot of sense, I'd be curious to know, do you feel that there is a lot of loss and grief underneath that? Then lastly, combined is cumulative grief and compounded grief. This is usually a combination of death plus non-death losses and all the secondary losses that come with that. And so it's losses that are within a shorter period of time. You're having loss after loss after loss. That's what the cumulative loss is. And then it's compounded. So you're having all these losses happen in your life, and then they're just like cumulative, and then they're compounding on one on top of the other. And this can happen for many reasons. Obviously, if there's just a lot of tragic death and loss happening in your life, but also if it's not being processed, it's going to compound, and then it's just going to keep on adding up. So that's what cumulative and compounded grief is. So though those are the different types of grief, I just wanted to really speak to those, but also this isn't a way to label someone. It's not like, oh, you have delayed grief, or Sara has masked grief, or so-and-so is anticipatory grief. That's not the purpose of this. I just want to really make that clear, because I think so much can get misconstrued when speaking about this. And I'm just here to educate. I know there's a lot of words that people don't like using and saying. And I know I use the word dying and dead and died. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think we're living in a world where people are trying to avoid using certain words, and I don't necessarily agree with that. And again, each to your own. So I'm not taking away from anyone's experience or anyone's anything. This is just the vocabulary that I use because this is the reality of it. And we can't really run from the reality of it by changing the vocabulary. And that's just my personal perspective on it. And so if you hear me saying that and that's bringing something up for you, then I would encourage you to sit with that. And again, this isn't therapy by any means. This isn't any coaching or any professional support. I'm just bringing awareness to this conversation. And I just want to reiterate that, because a lot of times this can get misconstrued. And if you're going through a lot, you're going to feel maybe triggered, and it's your own projections that are coming up. And I just want to make sure that this isn't the space for that. And I'm just educating everyone on it. So now that we have a little bit of understanding of the different types of grief and how that can show up in our lives, and how there's so many nuances, how we really don't know what someone's going through and how these impact us. And so the next thing I want to talk about is, which is such a big one. This blew my mind when I started learning about it, when I was going through my own stuff, was around secondary losses. So this is a very big component to grief. This is a very big component in grief work. When people who are in the grief world and work with clients, whether it's individually or in group settings, there's something we refer to as secondary losses. And these are losses that follow the main loss. So you have your main death or loss, and then these are the losses that fall under that. And there's so many, and I don't think people realize that there's so much grief in that. And then you can imagine, so you have your main loss up here, and then you have all these secondary losses. So it's a lot on your body and your mind, and there's so much that goes on with that. And I want to bring these to the forefront, to put a name to it, to put words to it, to really recognize and really drive home the point is that grief is so complex, like so complex. Even just by listing out the different types of grief, you can already see how complex it is and how two people will never have the same experiences or the same reaction to grief. It's very, very complex. And so let's put the judgment aside, let's put the shame aside, let's put the blame aside, whether that's on ourselves or on others, and really just come to a place of understanding. That's what I'm trying to bring here. And that's a big part of my role professionally, is to educate people on grief and to really normalize that we all go through it in a different way, and to stop telling someone they need to be doing X, Y, Z. So back to secondary losses, I'm just going to list them out. And again, as you're listening, as you hear me speaking to them, just listen to them and see, like, just pause even for a second and just think about where those could apply to your own life, and where are you grieving? What are all the obstacles that you're facing when you're faced with grief and loss? So secondary losses is safety, loss of safety, loss of income, loss of connection, loss of independence, loss of autonomy, loss of intimacy, loss of roles. I think this is such a big one. And roles is example, if you're a mother and you're a wife, but now you're having to be a caretaker. You can be a husband, you can be a dad, you can be whatever it is, but this is an example. So say you're a wife, but now you're having to be a caretaker to your husband. Like, there's loss in that. There's loss in what your life used to be like before. Your role as a wife is now as a caretaker. There's a huge loss in that. It's very common, that happens all the time. Loss of companionship, loss of confidence, loss of support systems. A lot of people, when they're going through grief, they lose a lot of their support systems because people just don't know how to be with someone in grief, or they just try to fix the griever. And the last thing the griever needs is to be fixed. We do not want to be fixed. We want to be held. We want to be seen. We want to be heard. We want to be understood. That's what grievers need and want. And so that loss of support system, it's a big hit when you feel like you have no one and you feel like you're all alone in your pain and in your heartache, in your sorrow. Loss of faith. A lot of people lose that when they're going through tragic events in their life. Loss of security. Loss of future hopes and dreams. Imagining this life for yourself, and now you're faced with this profound loss and you have no idea what your future is going to be like, or just envisioning a life for yourself, but you can't or don't have it. And I spoke about this one a little bit in my previous episode in the context of envisioning a life for yourself, but it's not happening. There is loss in that. There is grief in that. Loss of purpose, loss of community. So those are some examples of secondary losses. All of those fall under the main loss. So I can give you an example, like for myself. So when we're talking about non-death losses, I have a chronic health condition, and my main primary loss is the loss of my vision. I'm losing my vision. It's deteriorating over time. So I'm losing my vision. So that's on top for me. That's my primary loss. Underneath all of that, I have almost all of the secondary losses. Safety, for sure. I don't feel safe when I can't see. It's a safety hazard for me to be out in the nighttime when I don't have proper accessibility or what have you. Income, I had to go on disability. I lost my income when I couldn't work no longer. And again, I'm using myself as an example because it's just easy for me to relay that. But think of that, right? Anyone with a chronic health condition, let's use that as an example, who can no longer do their job due to their disability, due to their limitations, they now cannot go to work. So now they're put on disability. You don't make much on disability. So now you've lost income and you're trying to survive in this world. There is so much loss there. There's so much stress there. There's so much anxiety there. There's so much fear there of like, how am I going to cope? How am I going to survive in life? How am I going to participate in society? We need money to survive. That we need it. And it's not a bad thing. Money isn't evil, but we need it. Independence, freedom. So again, if you have a chronic health condition and you're no longer mobile or you're no longer able to get up and go run, sprint, but that's something that you used to do, but now you're immobile, you're homebound, you're bedbound, you're in a wheelchair, what have you, there's loss there. Confidence. You lose your confidence. For sure you do. When you're not able to do things the way you used to do, and now you're forced to rebuild a life in a whole different way. At the beginning stages, you lose confidence in yourself. You lose confidence in just life and all of it. Community, purpose, like everything just comes crashing down. And so you can imagine now someone who's faced with a loss and then they're dealing with all these other losses. Like, how compounded is that? This is what I mean. It's so complex. There's so many different areas and aspects of grief. And when I said they touch every single corner of our life, this is what I mean. Every single corner of your life. And this can apply to death losses as well. You lose someone very significant in your life, and now you have all these other losses, loss of connection, loss of maybe roles have changed. Maybe your spouse was the one who was the provider financially and took care of all the household things, and now they're no longer here. Who does that fall onto? That's now going to fall onto you, more or less. And so it's then now your roles are changing. Now you went from being this to now being all of that, the caretaker, the financial provider, the mom, the wife, the brother, the sister, like whatever it is. And so this is so interconnected with all the other losses that I've been speaking to. And so I really thought that was important to bring forward and just shed light on this conversation. And I know people might already know this, but I would bet you majority of people actually don't know this. And this is again why I feel these conversations are so important. And this is why I love this work so much, just all of it. But especially, I would have to say, the grief education piece of it, that was just something that felt so at home because I also didn't know that. I also didn't know I was grieving. I also didn't know that I had a million other losses underneath my primary loss. And know that and to have the awareness of that, it like shifts something in my brain. And I started to have more compassion for myself. I started to have more empathy for myself. I started to have more understanding of not only myself, but also for other people. Like, oh, that's what it means to grieve, or that's what it could look like, or that person could be going X, Y, Z. Like, it's not black and white. Grief is not black and white at all. And it's not linear at all. People think there's a timeline. There is no timeline. You hear it all the time. Oh, it's been 10 years. Oh, it's been 5 years. I can't get over it, or they can't get over it. And I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions that we have in grief is that we need to be over it by a certain time. And if we're not, we make it mean something about ourselves when it actually means nothing about us at all. And so I just think it's really important. And a lot of times I have friends who have lost significant parent figures. And a friend of mine has shared the first year wasn't as hard as the second year. The second year actually feels a lot more fucking hard than the first year did. And so I think in our world, we think that the first year's the hardest. You have all the firsts, right? The Christmases, the birthdays, the anniversaries, all of it. It's so fresh, but that's not usually the case. And the first 2 years of loss is actually considered fresh. So if you're wondering, like, it's been a year and a half and you're not over it and you're still feeling the heaviness of it and all of it, I just want you to know that is very normal. Very, very, very normal. I really want people to listen to this and take this point home, is that it's very normal to feel that. There's no timeline to it. And we know now that the first couple of years of grief is still very fresh. And I like to remind people all the time, I like to remind clients of that because again, we start to make that mean something about us when we're not over it. We feel like we should be over something. I have something to be very transparent, not to sugarcoat it or burst anyone's bubble, because I'm not here to sugarcoat. I'm here to be very raw, very real, very unscripted, is that the grief never goes away. So if you're looking for it to go away, it's not going to go away. Like I said, if that loss is gone, it's gone. If it's not coming back, you're going to grieve that for the rest of your life. I can't even imagine like thinking about if I lost someone so close to me, even if it was 60 years down the road, I will grieve them because they're not here. Yes, I will have rebuilt my life. Yes, I will have found ways to find meaning in my life or take their death and maybe do something with that feels very resonant in a way to serve others and bring awareness and education and all of that. But I'm still going to grieve that. So I really want you to all who are listening is that the goal isn't to get over it or to not grieve. The goal is to learn along the way and to rebuild your life after loss. And you totally can rebuild your life after loss. There's so many people out there that have had suffered profound, tragic, traumatic loss, but they are now still thriving and they're doing well. They've taken that experience and turned it into something that's meaningful for them. Doesn't mean they've forgotten about the loss. Doesn't mean that they're not still anxious or they're not still stressed or that they're not still feeling sad and they're not having days where they're just like so angry because they've lost someone or something so pivotal and prevalent in their life. That's not the case at all. It just means that we've learned to rebuild ourselves to like, what does that look like? It's going to look different for everyone. And so I think that's really important to also mention is that piece of it. And grief, again, touches us in so many different ways. And it's also the one thing that we know for sure. We know we're going to die. We know we're not here for forever. And so it's the one thing that we can actually use to our advantage. And I feel is take death, dying, grief and loss, and really have that help us, support us to shape our life. How do we want to live? What do we want to do? What is the life that we want to build for ourselves? And what legacy do we want to leave? I think that's really cool, like really cool to use death as a very great teacher. And I think it is. You hear this all the time. You probably see people talk about it, share about it. It's like asking people who are on their deathbed, what are their regrets? What do they wish they could have done? And it's always the same thing. No one cared about money. No one cared about status. No one cared about any of that. What people did care about is how you made them feel. What did you do in the world? How were you as a person? That's what matters. Spending more time with family. I wish I spent more time with my kids. I wish I spent more time with my parents. I wish I had more fun. I wish I didn't stress and, worry about things that actually in the end, like I'm not taking anything with me besides those memories. So that's what matters in the end of the day. None of this stuff that we all chase, myself too, stressed all the time, sitting in anxiety, fear of the unknown, and just chasing our goals like all the time and, wishing life was different. It's like, I think about it all the time. If I was on my deathbed today, and this again, I want to say this might sound morbid to a lot of people and people don't like this conversation. I could talk about this all day, every day for the rest of my life. I love this conversation so much. And I think we avoid death and dying so much. We avoid having the hard conversation. We avoid talking about any of it. And then after we're left with, I should have said something. I should have done that. Again, this is the reality of life. We're all going to die. Like, I'm sorry, but it's reality. It's the truth. So what can we do today to really build the life that we want to build, do the things that we want to do, and really take a look at our life? And I think that reflection is so great, and death can be our greatest teacher. One of the biggest things I think grief shows us and teaches us is to slow down. What is important? We always think these materialistic things are so important, or this is and that is, but really it's when you slow down, it's like, no, it's the love, it's the connection, it's the people you're with. It's nourishing your life, your body, your heart, doing the things that really fulfill you. It's not about all the external stuff, because in the end of it, when you're on your deathbed, you're not taking any of that home. It's not coming with you. I think a lot of times when we are faced with profound loss, then it forces you to really confront your life. And I think that's important. I think it's actually really, what's the word I'm trying to say? Like, that's not the plus side of grief, because I don't think there's a plus side, but like in a way, maybe there is. Like when we are faced with profound loss, it really forces you to look at your life and to look at your priorities, your values. Like, how are you showing up in your life? How are you showing up in your relationships? How are you showing up as a member of society? It really forces you to look at all that. And I think that's actually really beautiful, because I think we're meant to change, we're meant to evolve. And most of us are stuck in this autopilot, in this rat race, whatever that looks like, mentally, emotionally, physically, like whatever it is. We're just caught in this, like, it's like what we're programmed to do. There's so much more to life than just that. And so I think this conversation around grief and death and all of that, it's really opened up my eyes in so many ways. I am a whole different person than I was many years ago when I first experienced all this loss and all this grief. Even to like 7 years ago when I started learning about grief, I was in autopilot going from A to B to C, and then it just like constantly in this hustle bustle. I very much don't live my life like that. And my values are different than what they were. I didn't even really realize what my values were. Like what I prioritize now is just all of it. It's way different than what it was. And it's because my vision loss forced me to confront all of that. I started to realize, like, whoa, I used to take my vision for granted. I used to take my driver's license for granted. And so I'm using this example as these are the things that when loss happens, then you're like, whoa, you just see life in a whole different way. And it's just, wow, I was worrying about things or didn't really have responsibility over things that I should have. And now I am so grateful for my senses, not just my vision, but touch, hear, smell, like all of it, because it can be gone in a second. None of us knows what's going to happen. And so I think that's just so powerful to understand that and recognize that. And I don't think we should run from death. I think about that all the time. I want to know, what are you thinking? What are your thoughts? I don't know if this is culturally, I think societally, but possibly even culturally, but we want to avoid those conversations, right? We don't want to talk about it. Even, for example, making a will. I think so many people are afraid to do that. They don't want to talk about it, or they don't want to involve their kids in it. And it's like they don't want to have the hard conversations, but these conversations need to be had, because after you're then scrambling and then you're dealing with all this like heavy things, not just the loss, but all the shit that comes after it. And I think we need to be more comfortable. We need to get comfortable being uncomfortable. That's what we need to do when it comes to death, dying, grief, and loss. We need to get comfortable being uncomfortable. It's not easy having these conversations. Let me tell you, when I have conversations with my parents, it's not easy, but they're needed to have. I want to know what my parents' wishes are. Like, I thank God and, bless me that I still have both of my parents. But one day they're going to die. I'm not naive to that. But when that happens, I want to know what their wishes were. Like, we don't talk about that. But like, why is it that the dying person who's dying doesn't have a say in their death? How it's going to happen, what's going to happen, what they want to do, what they want to wear, what kind of service they want to have, where their money's going to go, where their assets are going to go, like all of that. We run from that so much because we are scared and because the emotions are so heightened. Of course, they're going to be heightened. But that's the beauty of life, is like we're meant to feel and feel all of the emotions on all spectrums, not just the good ones, but we're meant to feel the heartache. We're meant to feel the grief and the sorrow. I think there's something so beautiful in that, to be able to witness that. And I always use this example, but one of the examples I have is actually, well, both times, but especially with my paternal grandma who passed away. They were telling her to go to hospice. She didn't have much time left. She absolutely refused to go to hospice. She's like, I want to go home. I want to die in my home. So they granted her wishes and the family brought her home. And we have a big family, so people were in and out. But when she died, we were all there. She was so big on family and just always wanted us all to be together. And We were at her house. Hospice had set up her bed, palliative care, and all of that. We knew it was time that she was going to be leaving. All of us, all my cousins, and all the adults, the parents, her kids, we were all surrounded on her in her kitchen, and she was on the bed and she was dying. She's preparing to leave. She had been doing that the day before. So we knew that the signs were showing that she was peacefully to go. And I know that now. In the moment I didn't, because again, this was also, it'll be 10 years in December. I didn't know anything about grief, but now I look back and I'm like, that was the most beautiful experience that I, speaking for myself, could have ever had for my first interaction with death, dying, grief, and loss. I'd never lost anyone prior to that. So this is my first one. I was 28 at the time. And to just be with family, for all of us to be there as she took her last breath, as she peacefully just left, her soul left her body. And I thought that was very beautiful. I think, like, I want that. I think that there's nothing more special than that. And as heart-wrenching as that was to see that, and then all that's left is a physical body, which is a whole other conversation about afterlife and the soul and her presence and all of that, is there's so much there. But I just think it's so beautiful. Not many people get to have that experience. And I know a lot of people look at that or listen to this and they're like, you're nuts, you're crazy. Like, how can death be so beautiful? I think it can. I honestly, truly can. I do believe that wholeheartedly. And that experience was very special. And then last year, my maternal grandma passed away. I unfortunately was out of town when the day her soul left her body. But leading up to it for 2 weeks, that was so pivotal and so profound for me because this was my maternal grandma. And so just witnessing me, my mom, and then my grandma, and just really seeing the lineage and the generations play out right in front of me, that was something that was just, I can't even put it into words. I've spoken about it a little bit, but just really something happened and shifted in me during that time. I was in my grief educator certification program. I was going through so much grief on my own. I was preparing to do a psychedelic therapeutic journey, and so much came up for me. And it was all around just grief and the ancestral trauma and grief that we all carry. And so I also find the timing of my grandma's death to be very like, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't feel it was a coincidence, and I know that's gonna sound weird to a lot of people, but something about that, and just with my experience, speaking for myself, was just something so profound. I just learned so much, and, like, sitting there, and all she was doing was telling stories. This is the point I'm trying to make, is, like, how beautiful is that? She didn't talk about anything. She just talked about her family, like, so much. She talked about people who have passed away. She's talking about her dad a lot. She was just talking about all the memories, and she was talking about, like, well, the legacy that she left and all the things that she did in the world to give back. The seva that she did, which is being in service. Um, that's all she talked about all the time. And she was just bringing up memory after memory after memory. And I thought that was so beautiful to witness that and to hear that, because honestly, we've never heard those stories before. So we're hearing all these stories at the end of her life. And in a way, that makes me sad. It's like, why don't we have these conversations throughout? Even thinking about the funeral, we do speeches, we put together a slideshow, we do all this, we praise them, we talk about what they meant to us and how they made us feel. Why don't we do this stuff beforehand? Why do we wait till the person's dead? They can't even hear you for us to say that. I think we should be doing all this before. I think that, and this is the thing, we don't do that. We don't share our feelings or emotions because it's always so hard. And might not apply to everyone, but most people, I don't think, do that because we're so afraid. But then it's like they're sitting in their coffin and all of a sudden we're telling them how much they mean to us. And so I just think, again, this is all tying into death can be such a great teacher and actually can be really beautiful. And I believe in the afterlife. I believe that we do transition. I don't know where we go, what we do, but I do believe that. I believe that our body is just hosting our soul. But when we die, our soul transitions and they're still here. They can still hear us. They can still see us. They can still feel our presence. Like, there's something there. I also think that's another part of grief, death, dying, and loss, that is very beautiful. And not many people believe in that, but I definitely do. And I don't think I ever used to, but I think just going through everything, I do believe that there's a higher power. And I think that's really, really cool. And even just thinking about those experiences of having those conversations with our loved ones who are dying. Like, what is it that you want? What do you want to wear? How do you want to leave? Is there anything that you want to share with us that we don't know? All the conversations, or even how are you feeling? Are you scared? Are you nervous? Are you ready? What's going on? Let's chat about it. I love that. I will put that out there right now. I want my family and friends to talk to me and to ask me and involve me in my death. That's going to probably sound really weird. And I just said that for the first time out loud, but I want that. And I actually, just this whole topic, I know I might be rambling, but it's all interconnected. And this is just what's coming through for me. Again, a voice is unscripted. So I'm just really just speak to whatever's flowing through me right now. But I remember I used to work at the hospital, and I worked in an acute oncology ward at a children's hospital. Kids had cancer, they were dying, and it was very hard, upsetting. But there's something also really beautiful about working there, which is a whole other conversation. But I remember I can speak to my own culture and our own family. The way we've done funerals is like the person passes away, and then for almost a week, you're at their house, wherever they lived, and you're mourning. It's heavy crying, and you're grieving. You're coming in, and it's all set up, and it's like a revolving door. People are coming in and out, and they're coming to pay their respects, and they're coming to be with the loved ones who have lost their loved one. It's a lot of mourning, but it's a week. So day in, day out, you're at the house, I guess, holding space physically for people to come in, and then you're reliving the story or reliving what happened and talking about the loved one, their legacy. I also think that's really cool. The week-long thing that we do in our household or in our families and in our culture can be a lot. It's draining, it's exhausting. That part of it I totally get, and I feel like it needs to shift a little bit. But the talking about the person, I love it. I want to know all of it. I want to know the memories, the childhood, their legacy, their work, funny memories, even sad memories. Let's talk about it. Let's keep their memory alive. Just because they're not physically with us, their soul is still here. That's how we carry on their memory, is by talking about them. And so many people don't want to do that. So literally for a week, we're mourning, and then we have the funeral, and we go to the funeral, and then that's it. Like, it's said and done. And what was I trying to say here? Okay, yeah. So that's what I'm used to. And then I was working at Children's Hospital, and the kids, unfortunately, were passing away. And I remember someone sharing that they were doing a celebration of life. I had no idea that that was even a thing. Because again, I was like, okay, you just mourn, mourn, mourn. And you don't really do anything else. And you go to the funeral, you say a few words, and then you cremate them, and then you're on your way. But celebration of life really stood out to me. And I was like, oh my gosh, that is such a cool idea. So basically, I can't remember the exact details, but instead of a funeral, they did a celebration of life where they had everyone wear the child who had passed away, their favorite color or their favorite jersey or something. And they wanted people to talk about, obviously, you're going to be sad, you're going to be grieving, you're going to be crying, but they also wanted to make it a celebration of life, talk about memories, share memories, what's your relationship with them, and all that stuff. And it was a celebration of life. And I thought that was so cool. So, so, so cool. And especially because I didn't know people did that. And I remember thinking, this is also like 20 years ago or whatever. I remember thinking, that's what I want. At that age, when I didn't really know much, but I always had this love for life, this zest for connection and community and love and people and friends and family and getting together, storytelling. Like, hello, you're listening to the Story Hour podcast. That's just me. And I have such a strong desire for all of that. I remember thinking, I want that. I want a celebration of life. Yes, the funeral is going to happen. And culturally, if that's what we do, I'm okay with that. But I also want a celebration of life. I want people to wear bright colors or wear my favorite color. I think that's so beautiful because, again, all we wear is dark colors. We're wearing black and white because we're supposed to be so sad and it's supposed to be so somber. Why does it have to be like that? Like, celebration of life, I thought that was so cool to wear the person's favorite color. And it doesn't have to be so dark all the time. And that really stood out to me. And I'm sharing this because it really opened up my eyes and my perspective of different ways of how people mourn and grieve and celebrate or not celebrate. But to me, it is a celebration in a way. Yes, it's sad because they're leaving, but it's celebrating their life, their legacy, their love, their relationships, the connection you had with them. I think there's just something so special about that. That's what I think it should be about. I find something so beautiful and rich and just very heartwarming about this. It goes back to the human experience. We're here, we come here, earthside, our soul comes here, we're given this temporary body, and we grow and we evolve, and we're faced with all these challenges and roadblocks and this and trauma and grief and all these things. And just like that, it's over because we are here for a short time. And at the end, too, walking each other home, like examples I use of my grandmas, we were there as they were walking themselves home, but we were walking with them. I think that that can be really profound and it can really teach us a lot, really teaches us grief in general. To bring this around, it teaches us to be more present. How many of you can say that you are present in your life, in your day to day? Even pause and reflect on that. Am I present in my life? Do I take time to slow down, to be with myself, to be with my thoughts, to be with my feelings, to just be, not even in your thoughts or feelings, but just to be present, to appreciate the beauty around us, to appreciate the beauty of life, to appreciate the human experience for all that it is, to allow the ebbs and flows of life, to allow the emotions, whether they're dark and heavy or light and fun and playful. Are we just moseying on and going about the motions of life, not giving ourselves the time or day to be present? I think grief can teach us a lot. I'm going to transition out of that and wrap this up and just talking about grief. And I really want to normalize that. It's very unique, very, very unique to each individual. We really need to let go of comparison. We need to let go of judgment. We need to let go of shame. By listening to all this, I hope you understand that grief is very complex. It's very nuanced. There's so much there. There's so many layers and aspects to it. And again, it touches every corner of our life, no matter what, no matter how hard you try, it's there. And the goal isn't to fix it. We're not here to fix it. And I think a lot of times people come into counseling or into coaching and they want it fixed. Like, can you please take it away? I don't want it. And I get it. I'm there too. Even knowing everything I do, the education and training that I have and the experiences that I have, I still, when I'm in it, and I will tell you, it's been 13 years since my diagnosis. I am in it. There's a couple of seasons during the year that I'm depressed. And I think I shared this in the last episode, but I'm still in it. And there's a lot of times where I go into therapy and I go to my counselor, like, take it. Like, I can't, I don't want it. Fix it. What can you do? Help me. But that's just the grief talking. That's the pain talking. That's the trauma talking. That's the heaviness of it all, the heartache, the sorrow that's speaking, the pain that's so ingrained inside in our bodies. That's what that's speaking. But the reality is we can't fix it and we're not supposed to fix it. We're here to be with it. We're here to feel it, to see it, to acknowledge it, to give it a space to feel seen and heard, to be understood. Like I shared at the beginning of the episode. That's what grief wants. Grief wants a voice. I always say that. Grief is looking for a voice. The more it stays inside, the more you suppress it, the more you shut it down, the more it's going to get compounded. Remember, I talked about going back to the beginning, cumulative compounded grief. The more you shove it down and you keep just shoving it and shoving it and shoving it, it's not going to go away. It's now being stored in your body. And that can show up in other ways, in really tragic and traumatic ways as well. Chronic illness is one of them, mental health, just other things in your body, just so much that can happen, so much unhealth, the more we shove things down. And so I really want to encourage everyone is that please don't do that. I know it's easier said than done, but seek professional support, find outlets, even if it's small. What are things that we can do to express ourselves and to really start working through those things? We don't want to shut it down. And just remember, your timeline is your timeline. No one else is going to know what you've gone through, what you're feeling, what's happening except for you. And so take it day by day and just honor yourself as much as you can. Give yourself grace, give yourself compassion. There's no timeline, there's no end zone here. You're not going to be all of a sudden wake up one day and you're going to be like, oh, my grief is gone. Yay, life can move forward. It doesn't work like that. And to that point, it's a both and, right? We're grieving and living at the same time. That is also another point that I want to drive home, is that grief, I think life in general is a both and. It's not an either or. We're not just happy or sad. We can be both. We can be happy and sad. We can be both grieving and living. We can be both scared and excited, right? Like the list goes on and on. It's a both and. It's not just an either or. You pair them together. That's what it is. And so I think in grief, we feel like we can only feel one thing, but that's not the case. We can feel a multitude of things at once. And that's what it means to be human. That's the whole yin and yang. We're meant to feel that. There's so many times where I'm feeling elated, I'm just ecstatic, and I'm so happy and so fulfilled. And I'm also really fucking sad. And I'm also really feeling griefy, like just feeling a lot of grief in my body, in my mind, and really angry about my fucking circumstances. Like, I can't believe I've lost all my vision. I can't believe that I can't see at night and that I'm a risk for falling. Like, that fucking sucks so bad. So bad. But I can feel that, and I have a right to feel that. I have a right to feel anger. And I also, at the same time, I love my life so much. I'm obsessed with my life. Like I said, I have this zing, this like zest for life. I've always been like that. And even through all the challenges, through all the trauma, through all the fucking grief with my vision loss and other grief that I don't really speak about, it is there. Even through all of that, I still come out every day. I love my life. I am so fucking blessed with the life that I have. And that's just coming through me. Like, that's what I'm saying. Like, I just have this just so much love for what it means to be human and to be here and what it means to experience it all. It doesn't mean that I don't feel the depths of it. There's many times, guys, I will tell you, many, numerous, a million, that I'm on my hands and knees begging God, please. And I know that sounds cliche, but literally when I say that, I mean that. God, please help me, take it away, whatever it is. And for me, I find that very connecting because I do believe in God. I believe in a higher power. What that looks like, who that is, I don't know, but there is something. And I found my faith and my connection to God and my spirituality because of my loss. And that's what I was saying earlier. Like, there's so many beautiful things that can come out of loss. And for me, that was one of them. I trust in that. I feel like I'm not alone. And I do feel the presence of my grandmas. They've come in my dreams. I see them. I've noticed just small things that really allow me to be like, oh, they're there. Whether it's a bird, whether it's like a bald eagle, or maybe it's like something, I don't know, when I'm walking in nature, or maybe it's just something else, numbers, signs, like something. And again, that's a whole other conversation that we can have, but I believe in that so much. And I think that that keeps me going, to be honest. God, the universe, my grandparents, just all of it. That's a big part of what keeps me going, because I know that I'm not alone and that I've gotten through it once and I'll continue to get through whatever life throws my way. And that's just the way I live my life now. And again, that doesn't mean that the times aren't hard, but I think we can only control what we can control. I can't control my vision. I can't control that I can't see at night. I have a right to be angry. I can swear, I can yell, I can scream, I can voice that. Like, I'm angry. This fucking sucks. The cards I've been dealt are fucking shitty. And I still love my life at the same time. And that's a really prime example of it's a both and, not an either or. Life is a both and, not an either or. Just to reiterate that. So if you're feeling that it's black and white and it's one or the other, whatever the situation is, it's not. And I've been talking about this a lot more because I really want to bring that point home as well, because most of us operate in that, in the either or. But grief has really taught me that I can be in the both and. I can be living a really beautiful, thriving life, and I can be also really just in my grief and anger and sadness about the circumstances that I've been dealt. But again, it's what do we have control over, and how can we rebuild our life after loss that feels meaningful for us? That's going to look different for everyone. For me, this is very meaningful. And I always say the day I lost my license, which is June 2018, that was the worst, most darkest day of my life. And at the same time, now looking back at it, 7.5 years later, it was also the biggest blessing that God could have ever given me. I know those two things put together sound really strange, but for me, that was the case. I don't believe in everything happens for a reason. I know that phrase gets thrown out really all the time. I've always pondered that. I remember vividly having a conversation with my girlfriend about that and asking her, like, I don't believe that. Like, how does that make sense? To then going, okay, yeah, maybe everything does happen for a reason. And then now I'm like, no, no, no. There sometimes is no reason for something, especially when you think about death, dying, grief, and loss. And the worst thing you can say to someone is everything happens for a reason, which I'm going to get to because I'm going to end the episode off with what not to say to a griever. But this just, I guess, beautifully pairs into what I'm going to segue into next and to end the episode. But for me, my vision loss, me losing my driver's license was the worst thing, but it was also my biggest blessing. I always say, what's the phrase I use? My vision loss was my biggest trauma and greatest blessing. I think that's what I used to say. Basically what I'm trying to say is that it was the worst thing, but it's also the best thing. I would not be sitting here with you right now if I hadn't lost my license that day. I look back to that time all the time, like reflect on it, especially at the beginning, even now. If I didn't lose my driver's license then and I didn't go through all that, I would have probably been sitting in a dead end 9 to 5 toxic AF job. I probably would have never left that job, to be honest, even though so much of me for so many years needed to leave. I never did. I would have been stuck there. I would have never gotten alternative treatment. I would have never resorted to holistic health and gone to India, met with my naturopath, gone back to school, got my driver's license back. Like those are just like 6 things on the top of my head, but there's so much. For me personally, for my story, I know this isn't everyone's story, but for me personally, that was my story. That is my story. So much came out of that, even though it was the most darkest, like, I want to die moment or experience of my life, it also brought me to where I am today. And that's what I say about there is a lot of lessons that can be learned from death, dying, grief, and loss. And I'm not saying this again to negate the grief and the loss. And I don't think that you need to be grateful for XYZ or this and that. That comes with time. But what I'm saying is that it's a both and. It's a very good example of it being a both and. And so, and when I talk about finding meaning, it's like, for me, this is my meaning. I took my loss and I turned it into something that was passionate and powerful. And then now I can be of service to others, to be service of you, to sit here in front of you and to lead this conversation, to guide this conversation, to bring this conversation to the forefront, to talk about grief, to talk about loss, to talk about death and dying, to not run away from having these conversations, but actually face them head on. I want more of this. I want to talk more about this. I love it so much. And to bring awareness to it, we need to stop running from these things because they are the very things that are keeping us stuck, that are holding us back. And so we need to start having more honest conversations. And that's not for everyone. But I remember I was a guest on the Life with Grief podcast with Sara, and her and I had a couple of conversations before. Now I'm like, oh my gosh, even during our first quick call that we had, we could have talked for hours on end. And I was smiling and laughing. It feels so good to be having this conversation with another grieving fellow. I remember we were so excited and so happy, and it's our own little grief community, if you will. Everyone's in it. Whether you're not in it now, I bet that based off what I've shared with you, that you have grieved in the past. Maybe you didn't know it, but you definitely have had experiences where you felt a lot of grief and a lot of loss in your life. I hope that I was able to put a name to it, to put words to it, just awareness to it. And if you haven't, for whatever reason, you will become a part of the grief club, I guess, if that's even a thing. But we all are going to. We're all going to die. We're all going to lose someone. We're all going to go through changes in life. And that's just what it is. But let's start to normalize these conversations. Let's have more of them. I'm going to leave you with what not to say to grievers. I think it's really important because we, again, live in a grief illiterate world. We don't know how to be with someone. We don't know what to say, what to do. And it's not intentional. It's not malicious. We just have never been taught that. We've never been taught or educated on grief and what does that look like? And all the complexities of it. We just want to fix. We just want to fix. The person who's grieving doesn't need to be fixed. They need to be, again, got to drive this point home. They want to be held. They want to be seen. They want to be heard. They want to be understood. They want to know that I'm not alone, that I can call up my friend, I can call up my sister, I can call up someone and just let my grief have a voice. Let it be known that this is what I'm feeling. And so what not to say to grievers. 1, start a sentence with "at least." That is like a big no-no in the grief world, the grief club, grief community, grief work. When you start sentences with "at least," you're basically dismissing the pain that the griever is feeling. You're taking away from what they're feeling and you're trying to replace it with something else, right? Like, at least you still XYZ. So instead of saying, "at least you had time to say goodbye," so if someone's dying and someone's really expressing their grief and you say, "well, at least you had time to say goodbye." Don't say that. Don't start any sentence with "at least," because again, you're dismissing what their pain is and you're trying to replace their pain with something positive. And that's not the antidote to grief. What you can try saying instead, and again, these are just examples that I came up with. Don't use them if they're not the way you speak. These are just examples, right? Use your own voice, use your own language, use your own heart, do whatever. But these are just examples of what you can say instead of. So instead of saying, "at least you had time to say goodbye," try saying, "I can't imagine how hard this is for you. I'm here to listen and support you however you need." That's all they want. If you just say that, they know that you're there for them. They know that you're listening. They know that you're offering your support when they need it. Number 2, starting a sentence with "it could be worse." Please, for the love of God, do not say something like that, period. It could be worse. Because let me tell you, this implies that whatever the griever is feeling is not valid. It's suggesting to them that they should focus on other people's sadness and trauma and grief and situations instead of processing their own grief. Yes, there's maybe worse things out there, but let me tell you, to a griever, this is the worst thing that they've ever experienced in their life. People always say it could be worse. Well, at least you have, again, using at least you have this. There's starving children in third world countries. Kids are getting bombed. There's people have lost their homes in these major floods and fires. These are examples people will give to you. Please stop. It's the worst thing you can say because, yeah, all of that's happening. No one's saying none of that's happening. But right now in this person's life, this is what they're experiencing. This is the worst for them. This is their worst. So stop saying to people it could be worse because no, it can't be worse. Because for them, this is the most traumatic grief experience that they've experienced. For you to say that, you're basically telling them that they're not allowed to feel that way because someone on the other side of the world doesn't have enough food. No, it's not an either or, remember? It's a both and. I can even feel the rise in me because I hate it so much. And people used to say that to me all the time. And again, I don't think it was ever intentional. It's not malicious. People just don't know what to say. But these are the worst things you can say to someone, because this is going to force them to shut down immediately and not trust you and not want to talk to you. And it's going to bring up some anger, because naturally people used to say that to me all the time. An example I use is, oh, well, there's starving children in third world countries. At least you have food. And I wanted to say, fuck you, basically. But I didn't, because obviously I didn't do that. But to me, this was the worst thing that happened to me. My world just came crashing down. I wanted to die type of feeling is what I felt inside. And you're telling me it could be worse? What's worse than wanting to die? I'm sorry, but no. So instead of saying it could be worse, try saying, I can see how much this hurts. It's okay to feel overwhelmed. I'm here for you during this difficult time. Plain simple. Number 3, starting a sentence with, be grateful for what you have. I mentioned this a couple minutes ago about telling someone to be grateful. And I shared my own experience that I'm actually really grateful in a lot of ways when it comes to my vision loss. However, gratitude is not the antidote to grief, because finding gratitude in the simplest of moments and finding meaning in your grief, that comes with time. And sometimes a lot of time, years in the making kind of time is what I'm speaking to. And everyone's going to be different. So when you encourage gratitude, it negates the pain and loss of what the griever's feeling. And it even sometimes can shame the griever in feeling grief and feeling sadness about their situation, because they've been told that they should be grateful for all the other things that they have in their life. It can even cause them guilt. Like, oh my gosh, why do I feel so bad? I have everything in my life. Oh my goodness. That's a real thing. So please don't say that. So instead of saying you should be grateful for XYZ, try saying it's completely okay to feel sad about this loss. You're allowed to grieve for what you've lost, and that doesn't take away from what you have. Number 4, starting a sentence with, time heals all wounds. Yep, you got it. Another one that just is not true, because time is not going to heal the wound. Like I said, as long as that person is dead, as long as that something is gone in your life, you're going to grieve that for the rest of your life. Unless that comes back, unless your dead significant other or relative, family member, or colleague, what have you, comes back, you're going to grieve them for the rest of your life. Unless you're faced with this chronic illness and you're faced with the limitations and the restrictions and you have the disability, you're going to grieve that unless you got all of that back. So time's not going to heal the wound per se. Yes, over time, things start to shift and you start to learn coping mechanisms and tools and you learn to rebuild your life. But telling someone that time heals all wounds is so wrong, because again, grief is not linear. There is no timeline to grief. So this is just dismissing. It's dismissive altogether. You're also suggesting that healing is just a simple process. It doesn't acknowledge that the grief is very personal and everyone's going to be different. So instead of saying just give it time, try, I know this is a long process and it's okay to take the time you need. I'm here to support you through it, no matter what it takes. Number 5, start a sentence with, everything happens for a reason. Back to what I was saying. I don't know how I feel about this. I think this can feel very invalidating, suggesting that the griever should find meaning in their suffering rather than allowing them to feel the pain, to feel the loss. It can come off as really insensitive, especially in the early stages of grief. Like, I don't think there's actually a reason in death. Like, we're all going to die, but not everything happens for a reason. Some things are just really fucking tragic and you can't explain it. There's no reasoning behind it. It's very harmful to say that. This is such a complex conversation, because what's coming through for me is, for me, I do believe everything happened for a reason. I didn't see it in the moment. I'm now 7.5 years out saying this to you because, again, had I not lost my driver's license and lost so much of my vision in 2018, I would have never done all those things I listed. I wouldn't be here sharing this with you. So for me, I feel that losing my license, not so much the vision, but losing my license had to happen in order for me to get to where I am. And I believe in God and the universe. I feel like my path was always meant to do more, to be more, not be stuck in that 9 to 5 hospital job that I was doing. So again, this is complex. There's nuances here. Everyone's situation is going to be different. So instead of saying everything happens for a reason, try saying, I can't understand why this happens, but I'm here to listen and support you as you process this. Your feelings are valid. Number 6, do not start a sentence with, you need to move on. Again, going back to time, going back to grief isn't linear. Everyone's on their own timeline. There's so many reasons why someone may be struggling with their grief. Was it safe for you to express your feelings and emotions growing up? Did anyone ever hold space for you? Did you have emotional stability in your life? So many reasons, and this is what you unpack, obviously, through therapy and coaching, but you don't tell someone they need to move on because this pressures the griever also to feel like they should be further along than where they are. And I talked about this earlier in this episode about you start to almost gaslight yourself of not being far along and that you should be somewhere where you're not. And you start to make meaning about yourself, insecurities, the self-doubt, the criticism, all that starts coming through. So when you say that to someone, you're just pushing them further into their grief. So instead of saying you need to move on, try saying there's no rush to heal. Grief is a personal journey, and I'm here with you, no matter what that looks like. Number 7, starting a sentence with, you should be over it by now. So these kind of go hand in hand, right? You should be over it by now is implying that there's a timeline to grief. Again, I'm going to be repeating myself. There is no timeline in grief. Grief is not linear. You're going to go up and down, up and down, up and down for the rest of your life. That's just how it is, and that's just how it works. But that's just the beautiful part of it because you're going up and down. You're not just going down. And that's what grief work helps you to rebuilding your life, is that it's actually healthy to be going up and down. And what's not healthy is not having any of the ups and slowly declining and declining, because the whole purpose is to rebuild our life and to get to a point where we have resources within us that can support us and to move forward and to grieve and live fully at the same time. So instead of saying, aren't you over this yet? Try, grief doesn't have a timeline. I'm here for you every step of the way, no matter how long it takes. Those are just some examples. That's 7 examples for you there that I think are very common and we hear it all the time. And secondly, just ways that you can support someone. And to be honest, a lot of times you actually don't need to say anything. So if you don't know what to say, because that's very real, I want to acknowledge if you're in that space and you have someone who is very deeply grieving and you're like, I don't know what to say, so I just say this because I think it's going to make them feel better. I get it. I know you're not being malicious. I know you're not wanting to cause harm. We just don't know how to be in other people's discomfort, so it makes us uncomfortable. Even though they may not be uncomfortable, you are showing signs of being in discomfort, which is very normal. We just don't know how to sit with one another in their pain and in their grief and their sorrow. And so a lot of times, if you're in a situation and you're like, I really don't know what to say, and you want to say one of these things, like everything happens for a reason, or you should be grateful for, don't say anything. Silence can be very strong and powerful. And just sitting with them, maybe putting your arm around them, giving them a hug, doing some physical touch, holding their hand, wiping their tears, or just sitting with them and don't say anything. That honestly would do wonders to a griever rather than hearing all these other things that they should be doing or should be feeling. You're not trying to remove their grief. You're trying to sit with it, sit with them, allow it to just be there. Just bring it to the surface. It just wants to be held. If you think of it like an object or like a person, right? It just wants to be cradled and held, and that's just what it is. And so if you don't know what to say, don't say anything and just hold the space. It takes a lot to listen. When we listen, we're listening to respond, which is so wrong. We want to listen to just listen. We don't need a response always. And just let them know, I know this is really hard for you. I know you're going through a really fucking hard time. I feel it. I see it. I'm right here with you. That will go a lot further along than trying to fix it or trying to take away their pain, because none of us can do that. None of us can do that. Whether professionally, personally, we can't. Even when I'm sitting across clients, I can't take away their pain. I can help them. I can hold the space for them. I can provide them resources and coping mechanisms, and I can help them to process their emotions. I can unpack that with them. I can't take away their pain. I can't fix them. But the work that they're doing, or the work that you're doing, is what's helping you. That is what's fixing it. And so I think it's a really good space to end here. If you are enjoying the content, please like, save, subscribe would be the main one. I know the episodes are being downloaded, so please continue to do that. But if you can subscribe to the Story Hour podcast, I'm on YouTube at the Story Hour podcast, Spotify at the Story Hour podcast, and then Apple Podcasts at the Story Hour podcast. I'm also on social media on Instagram. The handle is at the Story Hour podcast. And then TikTok is at the Story Hour .podcast. And then on Facebook is also at the Story Hour podcast. So wherever you listen to your podcast, please subscribe to my channel so we can get these conversations out to more people. Just a ripple effect. One person shares it, another person listens to it. This is how we bring awareness. This is how we educate ourselves, how we create change in the world. So thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate everyone who is tuning in. I know this can be a very heavy topic. It can be very challenging. It can be really isolating, but I hope you learned something along the way, and maybe even just a piece of a takeaway is reflect after listening to this. Take some time to yourself and reflect on what you heard, and maybe just pick out one thing that really stood out to you, that you really appreciated, and that really helped you to really process your own grief or to put words to what you're feeling. And if you feel called to, you can always share that with me. I'm most active on Instagram, which is at the Story Hour podcast. You can send me a DM there. I'd love to hear from you. And so that's that. I will see everyone for episode 6 soon. Okay, take care.